Hi guys, I'm Jeremy and I'm here in Aurora, Colorado, which is where James Holmes lived. He was the infamous shooter inside the movie theater while Batman was playing on July 20th, 2012. So in this video, I'll go to the campus where he went to school, and then I'll head over to the cinema, and then over to the memorial for the people who died on that day. I'll go into the background of this case and then give my final thoughts on this atrocity. And so this building was actually red bricks before. They painted it white, so it looks a little different than it did in 2012. But he had actually placed explosives in his room, so he was hoping that those would go off kind of as a decoy to throw off cops, but the explosives themselves could have killed several people and destroyed the building. So yeah, pretty insane dude. I'll kind of tell this story as I walk towards his campus. So where he went to school is just directly next to his apartment here. So this is just the first restaurant you come to, just next to his apartment. It says it was open since 1998, so I imagine he stopped here once in a while to get some pho. You got a taco place next door too. And then yeah, right across the street you got the campus here. So here's where he was going to school. And he was in the graduate program for neuroscience, which actually was a PhD program. I'm not sure how long it would have been, probably several years. He only completed the first year and didn't do that well anyway, so it doesn't really matter. But anyway, I'll go into his background a bit. So he was actually from Southern California. He was born near San Diego. And then after, I don't know, a year or two, he moved up near Monterey, California, and was there through elementary school. And from everything that I've read, it seems like he was pretty normal, like in the first 10 years of his life or so. And he was playing normally with kids and different things. And then he had actually moved back to Southern California around San Diego. And so that's tough because kids have to readjust and meet new friends. And he really wasn't doing well. And so around that time, he said he had seen something like nail ghosts, which is pretty weird. I guess he had like heard sounds of ghosts pounding hammers on the walls and like shooting at each other, or some kind of either weird dream or psychosis. And around 11, he actually tried to commit suicide. I think he tried to cut himself or something. So that's quite unusual because usually that doesn't happen until people are at least teenagers. So definitely some worrying signs from the beginning. His family was middle class. His mom was a registered nurse, and his dad was a scientist and a mathematician. So well educated and not a bad upbringing, at least from what I can see. So in general, he seemed to always have pretty high grades despite some of his social problems or mental problems. He was always at the top of his class, whether in middle or high school and even university. Super high, did really good on his GRE. And he was even like supposedly in the top 5 of World of Warcraft 3, the computer game. And that's definitely something that's not easy to do, because anyone knows if you play with your friends or you play against the computer, you could win. You know, it could be challenging, but you could still win. If you go onto the World Wide Web and compete against people around the world and like 1 billion people in Asia and everywhere else, like, you might not last more than a minute. So he must have been some genius as far as that goes as well. So he finishes high school, and then he attends university for his bachelor's degree. Before he goes to university, he takes a 2-month internship, and I could show you a brief clip of him giving a PPT presentation about his work there.
There's mathematical models of the cell, such as that picture there. There's also computer simulations of hippocampal functions and neural network firings. And the knowledge that's gained is then made available to the public and the scientific community through the web. My mentor, John Jacobson, who works in CNL, is a philosophical type of guy. He's interested in how we perceive reality, specifically grapheme perception. And graphemes are basically just letters of the alphabet. And he wants to know how graphemes are mediated in spatial frequency channels. He also studies subjective experience, which is what takes place inside the mind as opposed to the external world. I've carried on his work in dealing with subjective experience. I've done it through Flash programming. Flash is set up to make movies, There's a timeline, which is on the top there. And within the timeline, there are layers, and layers give the movie order and structure.
So he definitely seems like a pretty sharp guy there, you know, really articulate and able to explain himself well. So many people will assume that, like, he probably had decent social skills, but that's not necessarily true. You're just making a presentation, you're not having a conversation with someone. And the guy who's in charge of that internship even mentioned that he had tried to explain to him on many occasions the correct way to input this like computer programming to do this internship correctly, and he wasn't doing it correctly and was doing it his own way. And so he didn't even end up finishing that program. But he did really good in his bachelor's degree. And ironically, the staff or some of the faculty had mentioned how good his leadership skills were in like small group assignments and things. So he did have some promise there in some social circumstances, even though most of the things you read and see is that he was quite socially awkward and distant. So after he graduated, he went back to live with his parents and kind of just back to playing video games and not doing much. He did work part-time at a pill factory, kind of like putting the pills together or something like this. And they even offered him a full-time position, but you know, he's a bright guy. He obviously knows he's not going to do that forever. So at this point, his parents encouraged him to go to grad school, which isn't a bad idea. Maybe he should have tried some other jobs, got a little bit more work experience, I think would have helped, because more school isn't always good, and it can be isolating, especially in his circumstance. And grad school is quite a bit different. Like when you're an undergraduate, you're probably more in like groups doing things, where in grad school or PhD program, you even have more time kind of alone, or maybe working occasionally with a couple people, but it probably wasn't the best thing for him at that time. But anyway, he applies to a few different schools, and for grad school you have to do some interviews as well, because they're going to be giving you a stipend and a bunch of money, and so they don't want to just throw away money. They want to see that you can actually complete the program. And so at least one or two of those interviews didn't go great, and they mentioned they definitely did not want him. But there was a couple schools that did accept him. One was in Colorado, and the other one was either in LA or in Illinois or something. But anyway, he decided to come to Denver, to Aurora, which is basically east of Denver, about 20 minutes. And he started that program here. And so things didn't end up going that well that year. He didn't end up communicating well with his professors. He did end up having a girlfriend that he met in a biology class or something. But, you know, he was kind of creepy. He's like, has a deadpan look a lot of the time when he should be showing emotion. And he was talking about things like his thoughts about homicide, which I'm not the best person for relationship advice, but the deadpan look and talking about homicide probably is a tad bit of a lady killer move. So not a surprise, she breaks up with him, and they briefly did get back together, but that was pretty much over. And throughout that year, he saw a psychiatrist about 7 times or so. There was one woman he was seeing, and a couple of the times another male had come in and kind of interviewed him. And so he definitely expressed his thoughts of homicide and things like that. And they did mention it to the campus police, and they did consider holding him. But that's also a tough situation, because you could try to hold him or detain him, let's say for a few days or a week or whatever, and they'll eventually get out, and then they might get revenge. So it's one of those tough calls that everyone thinks it's so easy to just diagnose or just hold someone when they say something, but it's not always super easy decisions. And he didn't mention he had any like plans or anything like that he was going to fulfill at that point, so there wasn't much they could do. But they were aware that he had something like a schizoid behavior or schizotypal, which is sort of like you're antisocial a bit and you're eccentric into your own world. It's a tough diagnosis, but there's no doubt there's something going on there. And it was also this year that he started seeing these things out of the corner of his eyes, like these ghosts that were shooting guns at each other or something weird. So there's definitely a little psychosis there going on. So around that time, he had actually been writing a journal as well. And it's too bad no one had seen that journal, because here he was outlining some of his ideas for like a mass shooting or something like this. and other homicidal thoughts. He was planning all the different ways he could go about doing that, like a chemical explosion, a bomb, being a serial killer, etc. Like, he didn't want to do the serial killing thing because it's too personal and you might only kill 1 or 2 people. He wanted the most amount, so he figured a mass shooting would be best. And he was thinking of the best area to do a mass shooting. He considered an airport, but ultimately settled on the movie theater, which was only a few miles from his place. Now, an interesting point about that journal is that I've read in a few reports that he mailed it the same day of the shooting to that psychiatrist, and if she had seen it, she obviously would have alerted the authorities, etc. But it was still left in the mailroom. But then I'd seen one other report that said it was 8 days before he mailed it, which obviously is a huge deal because, I mean, I don't even know where he would have mailed it from, but he lives across the street. I mean, it's only a 15-minute walk to campus, so it should have been there within a day or two, 3 tops. And it's just too bad that they probably have so much stuff going on. It was just sitting in a mail office somewhere, and just super tragic that it hadn't got to her in time if it was the 8 days. Now, if it was that same day, I'm not surprised they wouldn't have seen it. He would have intended for her to see that after the shooting. So it was in this last few months that he bought all of these guns, a bulletproof vest, a gas mask, protective gear for his neck and groin, and all of these things. You know, he had enough ammunition and guns for a small army, I'm sure. As usual, these guys just go so overboard. Super quiet out here. There's no one around because it's mid-June, so all the students are probably back home. But this was actually an army hospital called Fitzsimmons from like 1918 to 1996. And then in the late 90s, they turned it over for civilian use. And that's actually when it became a campus and a few different hospitals and research for different things. And then on the east side over here, they actually still have a veterans hospital, which actually I've been to before, and it's super huge. So that's one of the main buildings of the campus. I'd seen there was some labs for some of the things he might have gone to in some of the classes there. And then I think some of the other buildings he might have gone to were just kind of a few minutes from here. There goes one person's job. It's kind of cool though. A lot of people assume that the Batman was sort of either an inspiration or he was imitating the Joker. And he did dye his hair red before the event. But apparently there wasn't any big affiliation with that. He might have liked the movies, and there might have been something small there, but that wasn't like an overall reason why he committed the acts or anything like that. He knew that that movie was super popular and that the movie theater would be full, which was actually true. And actually the reason why I chose after midnight was because he hoped there wouldn't be any children there. But unfortunately there was a 5-year-old girl who was killed in the event. So here's some of the patient services, but I'd seen there was some neuroscience things going around in these buildings too. I'm not sure if the students were over here as well. But anyway, I'll cruise over now in a couple minutes to where the movie theater is. And then after that, I'll head over towards the memorial. Glad I'm not doing that job today. It's supposed to be up until like the 90s. Tarmac and fire, probably not super nice. Here's one of the main entrances to the hospital here.
So James did end up taking antidepressants. He took Zoloft. And this is pretty controversial. Some people think that this could encourage people to do violence or different things. I don't know if that's proven, but it could be a possibility. I've personally taken some of these things over the years, a while ago, and it definitely is weird. That's all I got to say. I'm not going to say it made me want to go on a shooting, but your brain is totally working differently. So there is that possibility. I do have some sympathy for James as far as the fact that, like, if this guy's seeing things and hearing things, that's got to be horrible to live with that. So there's some sympathy there. And in some of the pictures in court and when he's booked, he has this sad puppy dog look. But before the shooting, he took all these photos of himself looking really happy. And it's crazy because I saw one of these photos where he has black eyes, and I thought someone photoshopped that. But he actually got black contacts for those photos, so that's pretty crazy. But the bottom line is that he knew right from wrong. So there's some sympathy there for his mental illness, and these prescription drugs might have encouraged it, but he still knows right from wrong. So there's no excuses for what he did.
And as I mentioned, he booby-trapped that apartment with all these bombs and gasoline and tons of stuff. And he set it up where his computer would automatically start loud heavy metal about 20 minutes after he left the apartment for his shooting spree. And he hoped that that music would have alerted the attention of one of the people living in the apartment or the police or someone to come over and open that door. And if they had opened the door, it would have exploded. And actually a girl just living downstairs had gone up and heard it because it was probably like, I don't know, 11:30 or whatever. And she's banging on the door and she noticed it was unlocked, but she didn't push the door open. If she would have did that, she would have not only probably been killed, but possibly several others too, because it was quite a lot of stuff in there. They ended up having to get a robot in there for hours to be able to dismantle it and everything like that, but pretty crazy. So I'm here at the Century movie theater right now. I guess he would have come here at like 11:30, 11:45 for the show that was around, I guess about 12:15 or so. It's hard to see there, but it says weapons not permitted. I don't think they have any like metal detectors or anything, which I'm sure the movie theaters kind of died out during COVID and they want to have no restrictions, but yeah, pretty crazy. And so he parked his car right over here. The closest place to the door. I'm not sure when, maybe like 11:45 or whatever. And so how he did this was he walked around into the front, got into the movie, acted like he was going to watch the movie, and then after like 15 minutes or so, he walked out of the exit and he put a clothespin or something in the door so it didn't lock closed. And then he spent, I don't know, 5-10 minutes getting everything out of his car, his guns, his bulletproof jacket, and everything like that. And then he came into the movie theater around 12:39 or so. It was about 18 minutes into the movie anyway. And he just started firing. And I actually watched that part of the movie to see what was going on that time in the movie. And it was just regular dialogue. It wasn't an action scene, which is good, because if it was an action scene and really dark and a lot of cars racing and shooting, it might not have been as obvious and people might have not reacted so quickly. But since the scene was kind of slow, people had seen this dude walk in the back door with all of that equipment, and people started moving, and then he just started shooting. And obviously people within 2 minutes had called the police, and they came within 3 minutes. But of course they don't know that like he's parked behind or any of that situation. And it was a huge clusterfuck because all of these ambulances and police and people are panicking, so the ambulances couldn't even get in right away. So a lot of private vehicles and police vehicles were the ones to actually take them out of here. And then he just stood by his car. Like about 9 minutes later from when it started, the cops had apprehended him. He just kind of just sat there. He didn't have any effect. As usual, his kind of signature, like showing no emotion. And they got him into the car, and he even mentioned something about like wanting to see it. Like, I don't know if a video or something about it. But when he got to the station, he even asked if there were any kids there, because he obviously had some remorse in that aspect. And unfortunately, he did kill a 5-year-old. And the rest of the people were like in their 20s, a couple people in their 30s, and maybe one guy in their 50s. But yeah, either way, just insane. And then of course there was 70 people shot and just dozens, if not hundreds of lives ruined of these people's friends and family and everything like that. And it wasn't super easy to get out of there when a movie theater is full. And so a lot of people probably just laid on the ground or hid behind the seats. And it's true, like if you're laying on the ground, it's harder to hit you than like if your whole body's facing or if you're seated. But movie theater seats will not stop bullets. And I'm sure people didn't really think about it. High caliber bullets could go through like a tree 1 or 2 feet thick. So if you're ever in any of these kinds of situations, like you need to run out basically if you can, because if you're sitting there, you're just going to be a sitting duck basically, because most things can't protect you unless it's like a brick wall, or if it's tree, it's got to be a really thick one, or below a hill or something like that. But or even behind like a car in some places would be safer. But yeah, absolutely horrible. And I'm surprised too, like I was kind of even worried about coming back here because there'd be all these cameras watching me. And they had a lot of big lawsuits for, students said that they didn't protect the people in the movie theaters. And I'm not sure if anyone got anything from that, but I figured they'd at least put up like a bunch of cameras around just in case, and I guess not. And I didn't see anything when I went into the movie theater, like any metal detector or any people searching for anything, so I don't know. So of course he goes to jail without bond. He pleads not guilty of insanity. And during those first few weeks he tried to commit suicide as well. And he goes to trial about 3 years later, and they don't buy the insanity plea. They say he's definitely mentally ill, but not insane. And so no surprise, he was guilty. And it was just a matter of if he was going to get the death penalty or not. And there was one person that was holding out, so he didn't get that. But that didn't matter because Colorado abolished that in 2020 anyway. So he got 12 life sentences and 3,318 years. So I don't think he'll be getting out anytime soon. And he was in prison in Colorado for a bit in Cannon City and got attacked by another inmate. So now he's up in Pennsylvania. But to be honest, I wish in some of these cases they could maybe that night or like the next day or whatever, they know it's him, like force him to go to the morgue and be like, this is what you did, James. This is your great achievement in life. Because he went to a movie theater so he didn't have to see them. And he's just such a coward. So I wish he could have seen the faces and bloody bodies and all of the horror he brought upon these people. And especially that 5-year-old girl. He had to destroy all these lives because things weren't working out for him perfect. It's just horrible. And I wish he would have seen them because we know he's going to be in jail for the next, 50, 60 years. And I wish he had those images in his head to torture him. But because he never saw them, it's just names. And so he could avoid seeing what he actually did. So I'm coming up to the memorial now. It's about a quarter mile from the movie theater. It's pretty nice. I'm surprised there's not a plaque or anything around, but it's definitely the memorial. But anyway, I'll give my final thoughts about this. And I think James, kind of like Dylan and Eric and Chris Watts, in quite a lot of these cases, you've got guys that feel like there's no other way out or that it's the end. And like with Columbine, with Dylan and Eric, they thought after high school everything was going to be like this, that it was just going to suck as much as high school. And Chris Watts had these financial issues with his wife. He didn't think he'd be able to get through a divorce probably, and ended her life and his kids. And in this case, he knew he was going to get through this PhD program, which fair enough. I mean, I think the majority of people don't. And that's not even necessarily the greatest career. I mean, I know a lot of people in the medical field or that work at a university and teach or whatever. I mean, I've done that in China. I taught English and stuff, and it's not that amazing. And if he wanted a job where he didn't want to work with people much, he might have found something else. So it's not the end of the world when one thing in your life doesn't work out. Sure, do a lot of doors close in life for various reasons? Sure. But sometimes other doors open that you won't expect. But there's definitely other ways out besides either ending your life or doing what he did, which was end 12 people's lives. And I think it might even be 13, because I saw something else. And then you've also got, 70, 80 people injured and all of their lives ruined. That little kid's 5. And all of those other, and most of the other people were young too, in their 20s, early 30s. So yeah, there's other options in life. And as far as the gun control issue, I support the Second Amendment in our Constitution and everything. But you know what? People like James Holmes do not need a gun. And anyone like him who's either seeing things or super depressed or whatever, I'm not sure if they need to make a law or push something where some psychiatrists could put out a red flag on some people to make it a little harder for them to get guns. But they should do something to get this out of the hands of mentally ill people, because you got over a dozen people dead and wounded, and it didn't have to happen. And so anyway, I'll end this video with some basic information and photos of the people that unfortunately lost their lives on that day. So take care, guys. Be safe out there. And remember, life has its ups and downs. You're gonna have some bad times, but there's always some good times, and some doors can open.